to the next episode of Lifting the Soul Ministries podcast. Today, it's just the two of us, Jason and Jason. And we're going to be speaking about communication. And it's probably one of the most important aspects of any relationship, as most people will say. Communication, communication, communication. But there are proper ways to communicate that will get your message across to your spouse or your partner. And there are ways that you can speak to her where she'll actually want to listen. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. And I'm going to hand it over to Jason to go a little bit more into that.
Sure, yeah. It's been a while since we've actually done one of these, just the two of us. We've had so many guests on it. I almost forgot what it was like to just do it with the two of us, but this is cool.
Yeah.
So when we're talking about speaking so that she listens, it's not about yelling at her or grabbing her by the shoulders and shaking her. Oh, sometimes I know that that's something I feel like we need to do that. That's never the right way to go about doing things. But really, it's about asserting yourself in a way that allows her to trust you. And it's the whole idea of creating that trust that she really needs. When she's being defiant, when she's deciding to go out on her own, when she's doing her own thing, the biggest cause of that, and this is backed up by years of behavioral research from people much smarter than myself, of the fact that it's a demonstration that she doesn't trust you as her partner, the decision maker, leader in the family or in the home or in the relationship, whatever it might be. And because there's that lack of trust, there is a natural breakdown of communication. And the reason why this happens is because of one of two things. And they both come from what I call avoidant behavior. Avoidant has to do with anything that is not assertive. So we talked about assertiveness before. We're going to talk about it some more. We're going to talk about it often because I find assertiveness is one of the key areas that men tend to struggle with the most because they don't want to rock the boat. They have learned not to speak up for themselves or to assert themselves in a way that is both controlled, composed, and confident, as well as the belief that in order to control yourself, you have to control your environment. So acting in an aggressive way. Either one of these, whether it's aggressiveness or passiveness, these are two symptoms that create a lack of trust. Whether you are being silent, you are people pleasing, or you are withholding information, such as what you think, what you feel, what you believe, in an honest way, and you feel that you can't share that for whatever reason. Either she won't listen, you feel that she's just going to um, use it against you down the road because she has, or you feel like no one else has paid attention or valued what you have to say, so why should she? Whatever the reason is, passive communication is a killer for trust and healthy communication, as is aggressiveness, the sense of having to be overpowering, commanding, or ignoring your emotional tone or the emotional tone necessary for how you're speaking to her, where you are, what's going on, etc. So these are two really good examples of ways in which communication break down, which does erode or completely destroy trust in that relationship. And you might see it in small ways where she questions what you're saying. If you say something, she does the exact opposite, or silly things like that. Things that we feel sometimes can really be a big deal because it's what we've said, it's what we need. We, but if we don't demonstrate why this is the case, if we don't give any kind of context that the reason why this is necessary is because of this, and we haven't made it approachable for her to either ask questions or even test it out to see why it's necessary, and there isn't that what have we learned kind of moment, it can create that sense of despondency, or it just can create the sense of I don't think that you really have what it takes to really follow through with what you say you're going to do, whatever reason might be. They both lead to the exact same outcome. It creates emotional distance, resentment, and that breakdown of trust. And if your voice doesn't carry any kind of calm, certainty, or discipline to it, and really the three things that are hallmarks of a leader, a good leader are going to be the characteristics of composure, of confidence, and of discipline. And if you can't demonstrate those through your actions as well as through the way that you carry yourself and how you follow through on what you say you're going to do, then it's going to either be ignored or resented, or both. It'll be ignored until it's resented, and it gets resented because she feels like she has to pull two loads. She has to pull two weights, yours and hers, and no one can really pull can do everything. No person can. So I have been guilty of this many times in my relationships, and it's because of the way that I grew up. I have been that person who did not speak up, who felt like my opinion didn't matter because I was raised to think that. I was raised by a household where my father was always working, my mother took care of us or tried to, and she sometimes got mean. And so I learned very carefully or very early on not to say certain things, or not to act a certain way. And when I did the things that I wasn't supposed to do, act in a way that wasn't beneficial for that scenario, I was punished. And I was punished in extreme ways. And so I decided to hold back what I thought, how I felt, and what I believed. And it ruined so many relationships for me, or it helped me to miss out on opportunities that I wish I had taken. But there was no opportunity there because of the way that I had portrayed myself. I was someone who didn't want to be understood, so I didn't give people an option to understand me. And it really created a lot of issues, I guess. I don't know if anyone else who's listening to this can really relate to what I'm saying. But Jason, how do you reason with this? What are some things that you've understood, either in people that you've seen or in ways that you've acted, that have helped you understand that maybe this is the way that you've been communicating, either too aggressively or too passive?
Yeah, Jason, I can totally relate to everything that you've been saying in regards to both the passive and aggressive. I myself tended to be more from the passive side of things than the aggressive, although there were a few times I can remember being aggressive. But at the same token, I got more aggressive, or I should say my ex-wife was more aggressive towards me and I was more passive. And that created a very interesting dynamic because the more aggressive she got, the more I pulled back, the more passive I got. And it did create that sense of lack of trust and resentment and all sorts of other things. And I can go back to early childhood as well in regards to seeing the demonstration of how my parents communicated a lot. And very similar to you, I had a dad who worked a lot. He was still very active in my life in regards to being a parent, teaching me stuff, all that cool stuff. But he worked a lot, and my mom did most of the home, stuff. And then when it came to types of communication, like watching them communicate, was they had very poor communication skills, and it just got worse as their marriage got along in years. And so I didn't have very strong communication skills demonstrated to me as well. And I did grow up feeling that my voice didn't matter, all those kinds of things that you shared as well. And so I didn't speak up a lot with my ex-wife in particular during the marriage. I didn't tell her a lot of the stuff that was really on my mind. I just kept trying to be the appeaser, kept being the people pleaser, and it just didn't work. And it just, and she did question everything that I did in the marriage. When I did try to lead and stuff like that, would last for a short little bit. She'd give me the reins for a little bit, and then she wouldn't like something that I said or disagreed with something that I said, and then all of a sudden, boom, she started taking over, and I just backed off. and and that just, like you said, it just created more and more resentment between the two of us, and that was one of the largest breakdowns towards our marriage in the long run. Like I say, like I've said in the past, things like pornography and other things were also a part of that. Uh, and I take responsibility for my choices in those things, but I also have to take responsibility for how I communicated. And I believe now that I'm on the other side of it and I'm learning these new skills about communication and being able to be more mindful of what I'm saying, how I'm saying it, having more of a sense of purpose in the sense that I know that my voice has value, and that I need to communicate more clearly and not hold back what my thoughts are and stuff like that. I believe if I had the skills that I have now, a lot of those dynamics in the relationship would have shifted within the relationship, and we probably could have been together to this day as a result. But I mean, that's what life is for. We're learning lessons all the time, right? And so it's being that this is the gift of being in the position where I'm now, is not to be resentful of what happened, but to say, okay, these are the lessons I've learned, so now I can pivot and move forward.
Absolutely. And I find that this is a common dynamic that I see where one person gets frustrated and becomes more aggressive, thinking that it's going to wake someone up when really it does the opposite. It becomes a type of verbal abuse that a person really, that the partner really, they react badly to it. Where one person believes that by being more aggressive, they're going to ignite a fire in the other person, they're going to meet them there. I find that that's not the case, and it creates a dynamic, especially if the female partner in the relationship is the one that's being more aggressive. The male is going to tend to be more timid. There are many reasons for that. We can cover those another time. But I find that I think men believe that if they're more timid, that they can calm their female partners down, and that also is a poor strategy because what you're doing is doing more of what she doesn't want. The unfortunate thing is that she's focusing on what she doesn't want, and she's trying to create a solution based on what she doesn't want instead of what she wants, which is always going to be a much more effective way of creating solutions by having the focus on and the foresight to really understand what it is you want to see or experience, and then creating an environment that can foster, that can flourish, where what you wanted is what you can see, what you can experience. And I think it just comes from yeah, the frustration, but also a lack of communication and a sense of restlessness or impatience. When you decide that you're going to have things done your way and you're going to determine that you need to take control, and through taking control, you actually make matters worse, it, it doesn't seem to register that what they're doing is actually anything wrong. And I think a lot of it has to do with the way that people have internalized or understood the way that parental and a relationship or marital roles should be based on what they've experienced in their past.
That plays a huge role in it. And I know, like, looking at her, the way her parents communicated and stuff like that, you know, it stems back to that as well, right? Like, she had a lot of influence from the way her parents communicated and stuff. And, so it goes both ways, right? So I can't necessarily put all the, well, I'm not going to put all the blame on her. Like I said, I got to take responsibility for the role that I played in it. And, like you said, right? Like she was, there's many times in our relationship where she's like, I want to be closer to you. I want this and I want that. But then, these incidences would happen, and instead of us being closer, it would just drive us further apart. And again, I accept responsibility for that for that in my part too, because I did choose to shut down emotionally. I did choose to withdraw. I did choose to uh, crawl into a shell, so to speak, right? And and so those are choices that I made in that moment. And people can say, well, those are just emotional trigger responses or trauma responses or whatever. And yes, there's some truth to that, but at the same time, I also believe that at every moment we have a we have that fraction of a moment to choose to either react from the trauma or respond in a healthy way in how we deal with things in life. And I didn't realize that before. It's something more as I've been on my growth and healing journey that I've become more aware of, that I do have the power to choose how I respond. I don't have to go back to that victim trauma response. I can go to that grounded approach where I am able to say, you know what, this is not an appropriate way to be speaking to me right now, and let's approach this from a different way, right? Like we can either take a time out for our emotions to calm down and come back at this more collected, or there's other solutions that we could bring to the table.
I want to come back to something you had said before about how your wife would say what she wanted. She wanted to be closer to you. And I want to make a clear distinction between what people say they want and what they demonstrate they want. Because what we respond to, what we often react to, isn't what they say, it's what they
Mm-hmm.
demonstrate. And when a person says, I want to be close to you, but they act in an increasingly aggressive way, that's not what they're really saying. When they act in an aggressive way, what they're saying is, I don't want to be alone. I don't want to be lonely, and you are making me feel lonely. You are making me feel alone. They tend to play that game of focusing on the fact that we are a problem. And so, because they're acting that way, that is how we reactively respond. We react in a way that's like, okay, I'm a problem. I need to be less of a problem. So we become less. We become diminished. We reserve ourselves more. We go inside. We become emotionally invisible because we don't want to be seen as a problem. And yet, what our partner is demonstrating, what our partners demonstrate often, is they demonstrate this belief that you are a problem. And they demonstrate that because of the way in which they are acting or reacting to what you have done, or what they feel you have done. Not necessarily what you have done, but what they feel you have done, or how they feel you have acted, how they feel you have made them feel. And so, one of my favorite, um, I forget who said this, but I might be getting this wrong, but when you rely solely on emotion, you miss all the context because it comes down to not just how you react, because reactions are just a survival based mechanism that we use to respond to whether we feel safe or not safe. But being able to communicate with each other to find a solution, I think that this is really a lost skill. And this is really what assertiveness is all about. It's being able to find the solution to the problem that no one's talking about. Being able to be clear, firm, and communicate your needs in a way that demonstrates your boundaries and standards without being aggressive or apologizing. Being able to just communicate effectively, say, this is what it is, and this is where we are, and this is what is needed. That takes assertiveness. That takes knowing what you want to talk about as well, but it all has to be communicated with a sense of assertiveness. And when you are assertive, you aren't being loud, harsh, or stubborn. You're owning the fact that there's a part you had to play. You understand that. And you are willing to start the conversation through the fact that you are responsible for a part of how this transpired, how things unfolded. And she needs to be able to do the same. And if she's unwilling, another part of assertiveness is being able to hold your ground with knowing with what you know you are responsible for and taking nothing else on. And sometimes this becomes infuriating to our partners, especially of the female variety, because they can't. I find that a lot of them have a hard time really admitting that they are at fault in some way. They bear some sort of responsibility. If you've done a lot of work on yourself emotionally and psychologically, behaviorally, then this might be a little less of a daunting barrier. But for a lot of women, I find that there is a a lack or a resistance to taking any kind of ownership. And part of it, I think, is the fact that when you own something, it means you're being blamed for something. And it's really important to separate those two.
I totally agree that we need to be able to separate the distinction between being blamed for something and taking ownership or responsibility for something. And yeah, today's culture, I've been seeing it a lot on social media. People are starting to speak up about it a lot around this idea of accountability and responsibility. And it goes both ways for both men and women. We have to take accountability and responsibility for our actions. But as you said, and I do tend to agree, there tends to be more of a cultural shift where women are not willing to take accountability or responsibility for the way they behave and the way they react to things and stuff like that. And that is a challenge to deal with for sure. And like you said earlier, like we have to learn as men, how do we stay grounded? How do we stay in our grounded position and hold that assertiveness in the conversation where we still are communicating clearly, firmly, what we need, the boundaries that we have, and the things that like what that we're not just going to be a rollover kind of thing where she can just steamroll over us. And that does take skill. It takes practice, and it's it's going to be uncomfortable if you haven't been used to doing that before. And but the thing is the more consistent you are in doing this, the more consistent you are in communicating this way, the easier it will become, because she will start to realize, okay, yeah, he is, he's standing firm. He's not going to be pushed over easily. And ideally, she will start to soften in that approach, and that's kind of where, um, that's, and what I mean by soften is like, yeah, is like then she'll hopefully be able to then start communicating in a more healthy way herself.
The the idea of softening, I think, is um, it's one way that they can go, and I think it all has to do with something that I like to call sign behavior, SIGN, and it all all those letters stand for one thing. So it's shame, insult, guilt, and need to be right. And whether she's willing to eventually soften or not, I think has a lot to do with how men respond to that need to be right. That sense of, well, I'm going to do what I'm going to do, and there are no consequences for it. And being able to say, oh, yes, there are, and being able to share what those consequences could be, not in a malicious way that basically, well, I'll show you, but more the fact that every action has a consequence. There, whenever you take an action, there's a circumstance that follows. And the circumstance is directly tied to the actions that you use to influence that circumstance. You can't control circumstance because everyone is acting along in a way that contributes to the circumstance that you have. But in the ways that it um, directly impacts you, it's important to be able to recognize how you have been at cause for helping to influence that circumstance. And like I said before, I think a lot of it has to do with the belief that through taking responsibility, you also take blame. And I don't know a person alive who enjoys taking blame for anything. Now, those who know that they aren't being blamed, that responsibility and blame are not the same thing, that responsibility is more about knowing how you contributed so that you can do better, knowing what you can control so that you can change the ways in which you behave, in which you what you decide and how you act, and knowing that through that you create a different set of circumstances. It takes that level of maturity of knowing that yes, I can say that I helped to influence the circumstance we find ourselves in, and I can do so without being blamed for any of it. And that I think it is something that has to be learned or experienced over and over again in order for it to really be in order for someone to feel like it's true.
Yeah, and that's a big part of how do we create safety in our communication as well, and opening the doors for that ability to have that safe environment and trust environment to be able to also allow people to take that responsibility and accountability without holding on to the blame as well, or the shame part of it too, because shame and blame, there are shame's another aspect of it as well, right? Like they can go to that, well, now I'm a horrible person or whatever. You know, so it's not about making somebody feel bad or shaming them or anything like that. Again, it's about how do we create that safe environment where they can take that ownership, take that responsibility, and you're not going to point the finger back at them and say like, "Oh yeah, okay, I told you so," or "Haha, now you're this evil troll," right? It's like no, thank you for taking responsibility for your actions, and you know, and you do that by demonstrating, by taking responsibility for the things that you are responsible for as well in the relationship and the communication breakdown. And it's not by taking responsibility for the things that you're not responsible for. That's another issue that people tend to have, and men tend to have that too, right? Like where they'll just like, even if they're not responsible for a breakdown in the communication in some form, men are usually the ones to apologize first or expected to apologize first. And that's not necessarily a healthy way to go either. If you're not responsible for something, then you shouldn't be taking responsibility for it. But you can still look at, okay, what part did you play in that, and take responsibility for the part you played in it. But and that's a very big distinction as well.
Absolutely, and it's a distinction that has a serious difference because the ways in which you decide how you're going to see yourself is going to determine whether you are able to take responsibility for something or not. I just want to go on a little bit of a tangent here. There's an author that I love to read. His name is Patrick Lencioni. He also runs a leadership organization. And one thing that he talks about is how the idea of responsibility really works, and how we we take on roles based on not only the responsibility that we take on, but the responsibility that others demonstrate. And through understanding that once we have an established baseline, an established foundation that we believe that we can all work from, it becomes much easier to not only talk about the things that are uncomfortable, but to arrive at solutions. But there has to be that foundation of trust that is there. And this is true for the boardroom as well as the bedroom, in your professional life as well as your personal and your intimate life. You have to have trust in everything that you do. Without trust, nothing else happens. And as we talked about before, the being passive or aggressive, it leads to an erosion of trust. But once you have that trust, then you can really see how it is that you can contribute to a solution and what you can do to help create the solution, and what you do when that solution kind of, or when you don't act in the right way, because you know what right looks like. When you don't do that, the only person you have to really look at is yourself. And if you aren't willing to do that, if you aren't willing to take that hard look, this applies to all human beings, then it really creates that sense of in others that I don't know if I can trust this person because they aren't willing to not only do the right thing, but also understand or identify what it was or what it looks like to us and for them for not doing right. And so the idea of taking responsibility, not blame, is a huge aspect in that. It helps to reinforce trust and helps to understand that there is a way forward. So it takes care of the past as well as the future. What I mean by that is the past is the trust that you've created over time, and the future is what you're going to be doing from here on in. And really, when you're communicating yourself in a way that really has that sense of responsibility, that sense of not only what you're going to do, but also what you aren't going to do, the boundaries. The first thing you really want to do is you want to lead with that clarity. Not using emotion, being passionate, sure, but not allowing your emotions to override that clarity that's necessary.
Yeah, that's a very important part. And when we talk about boundaries, it's important that we really are clear, as we've been talking about. Like, communication is about being clear and concise. And so when we're talking about boundaries, it's about making sure that the boundary and expectation, or whatever, is stated directly and clearly. And it means that it's done in a respectful way. So as an example, like, if you're, you know, we'll just say, she's raising her voice to you or whatever in an unhealthy way, and things are getting very emotionally. It's like, okay, you can set the boundaries. Okay, we're going to pause here for a moment, and we're going to let our emotions calm down for a period of X amount of time. And when our emotions have calmed down, we're going to come back and reconvene to this conversation. Something very simple like that, right? Like, it's clear, it's precise. It allows everybody to take that breath and then be able to re-engage. And again, it's done calmly, and it's done firmly, in a way that you're not escalating the situation. You're not raising your voice to try to out trump the other person's voice to set the boundary, right? You're not elevating your stance, or creating a posture where you're becoming aggressive or anything like that. You're staying grounded, you're staying firm, and you're speaking calmly, and you're speaking clearly.
Absolutely, and all those things that you do really helps to let someone know exactly what the expectation is, and they can disagree with you while staying respectful, and they can speak their mind. It's just knowing that raising your voice does not raise your authority. All that is make you louder and more annoying, or makes you more erratic and seem like they can't be trusted or that they can't be relied on. And when you're able to stay being calm, regardless of what's going on around you, this involves something called what I call the five controllables, knowing that there's only five things that you can control in any situation, which are your thoughts, your feelings, your beliefs, your decisions, and your actions. Beyond that, everything is outside of your control. And that's okay, because if you can control yourself, you can control, for a large degree, you can control your outcomes. Circumstances play a part into that, but how you react to the circumstances really um, is a big part of how those interactions play out and how you move forward. Anyway, by being able to be calm yet firm, you set this expectation of this is what's going to happen, or this is what acceptable and this is what is not, and they begin to respond accordingly. Now, again, of course, there's a big part of this, which is the need to be right. How badly do you need to be right? And if the answer is I really need to be right, then what's going to end up happening is it's going to that need is going to override the dynamic that exists, where they're going to have this constant need of continually being a disruptor, someone that is going to try and um, get their own way, regardless of what's going on, and at the expense of the entire relationship. Eventually, their need to be right becomes much higher than the need for peace or the need to actually create a solution, and that's never a good thing. But barring that, having your partner see you as someone who is confident, composed, and disciplined. You're confident in your decision, you're composed in your manner, and you're disciplined in your execution. That raises trust by a great degree, regardless of of how right they need to be. You can't argue with results. And if you're someone who is constantly interacting in a way that gets those results, regardless of what they're doing, eventually they have to take notice or they have to move on. One of those two things will happen because chaos cannot continue to run rampant in the presence of an ordered environment. It can be contained and its own brand of crazy can be its own thing within that ordered environment, but it does not run rampant in an ordered environment. It can't. It's impossible. And being able to either channel that creative impulse or let it know that it has to go somewhere else are the only two decisions that can be made when you as a man are in a space of I am confident, composed, and disciplined. And I refuse to accept anything else in my life than me being able to be that way. And if another person is going to be jeopardizing that, again, two choices: either contain it or move it along.
Yeah, and that's something that's really important to realize. It's because there are times where relationships do become unhealthy, and I mean I'm a firm believer I that especially in a marriage dynamic. I mean my thought was always till death do us part. It didn't work that way, but when I think of the next relationship I enter into, I'm not looking for something short, sweet, or anything like that. So when I'm thinking about everything that you and I are talking about today, Jason, it's important for me to realize that these are communication dynamics that I need to establish right from the very beginning in a new relationship. And I need to be looking for a woman who has the ability to demonstrate these abilities as well, and not just passively, accept any woman who comes into my life just because I'm feeling lonely or whatever, right? And especially when you're in the dating world, or you're gonna, or like myself, gonna be in the dating world, having these communication skills and stuff like that, it's a lot easier to move on from a relationship early on when you're seeing that this person isn't able to, uh, handle these kinds of dynamics of a relationship and stuff like that. It's like, okay, well, do I want to continue on in this relationship, realizing that this is potentially going to be a pattern through the entirety of our relationship, or do I choose to move on and find somebody who is willing to communicate at this level as well? And so, but speaking to those who are married and are struggling with these things, like I said earlier, it's about setting those boundaries and saying, okay, well, um, I'm not going to accept, or I'm not going to receive this kind of communication, and we're going to take that pause, like I said, and then we come back at it when you have that calm, clear mind, and that's stating your boundary, being that clear, being that firmness, and be willing to step away from that conversation and not allowing it to escalate.
That's really important, and it's also important for men to be able to communicate effectively. One thing that you mentioned is looking for a woman that can really be confident like that. That's what you're looking for. You can be looking for quite some time. And the reason why I say that, and there are going to be some women that disagree with me. That's fine. There are there's a small, very small um, uh, sample of women that actually can be self-regulating like that. All in all, though, when you look at the landscape of women and men by far are much more level-headed, rational, and disciplined in their behavior than women are. And this is not a bash. This is just a biological fact. And so the best way for a man to find, I use air quotes very liberally, a woman that is disciplined is to create an environment where she can be disciplined. So you are the one that's actually creating that environment. You are setting the space for that discipline to take place. And yes, she is going to have her own way of being able to express herself as she should. It's just knowing that in the environment that you create as a man, it's important for you to be able to know what it is you are creating, to create something that is stable, that allows for that composure, confidence, and discipline. I'm using those words a lot. And then also being able to communicate in a way and express yourself in a way that doesn't diminish your capacity as a leader. And this is one of the most important things that I think that in this podcast we could talk about. Would you agree?
I agree. Yeah.
Okay, so really what we're talking about is we're talking about the ability to express yourself and yourself emotionally without looking weak. And that's a huge fear that men have, that if they express themselves or if they show any kind of emotion, that they're going to be seen as weak. If they become vulnerable, then that's going to be used against them. It's because a lot of times it is. But the way in which you can really communicate in a way that doesn't make you look weak, that doesn't diminish your ability to perform or be seen as a leader, especially in her eyes, is own your emotions without being overwhelmed by them. Knowing that you have emotions is great. It is one of the most key aspects of self-awareness that we could have. And being able to then utilize that in our communication and say, this is what I'm feeling, without being overrun by it, without letting it control you, without flying off the handle, or really exaggerating or really feeling the emotions deeply. That's not our job. That's called indulgence. We don't have time to indulge in stupid stuff like that. What we have time to do is to understand who we are, how we act, and communicate it effectively. And once we communicate that, being able to understand how we let others know what we're feeling, which is communicating effectively. So I'm just basically repeating myself now. But in doing so, you model a calm strength that operates under pressure. And knowing that even though there's tension, that you can manage that tension and keep moving forward. And that is something that women really look for in a man. They look for that ability to create, maintain, and utilize that tension in a way that keeps them moving forward. They don't collapse under the strain. They don't become paralyzed by the overwhelming sensation that things are going on, and they don't lash out in negative ways that destroy trust. They're able to just understand how they feel, communicate it, use it, and move forward with it. And that is a huge skill that I think more men need to learn. And that is something that's really slept on.
Yeah, and holding that presence is important because I mean, like you said, like women are more tend to be more on the emotional side of the spectrum, and their emotions tend to be very much more expressive in how they deal with things and stuff like that. And it's not about taking or it's not about having women be emotionless in their communication and stuff like that and everything, but it's how do we, like you said, it's about how we are being present, how we're being that stable ground in those emotional times, in those emotional ways, and also being able to regulate our emotions as well, and to be able to express our emotions in a healthy way. Because when women say that they want to feel us, they want to feel us emotionally and stuff like that, they're there's healthy ways for us men to be able to express those emotions and to be able to connect with our women emotionally at that level and not get to that place of being overwhelmed by them as well. And that, I believe, is a huge dynamic that, yes, women are wanting to see in their men, that they can be emotionally soft to a degree, and and have that sense of connection in that way, but still be able to have that masculine stance and groundedness in all of that, which, well, let's be honest. I mean, most men have been told to stuff your emotions down, to hide away, to be stoic in a way that is unhealthy, and that leads to all the addictive patterns and all that stuff that we can leave for another podcast, because a lot of those outcomes are symptoms of us not expressing our emotions healthfully.
Yeah, we could spend an entire other episode on what stoicism really is and how a lot of people get it wrong and how that affects relationships. I think actually we have an episode on that we're going to be getting to later on throughout this podcast journey. But for right now, as we're talking about the idea of healthy boundaries and authority in leadership, really what we're talking about is understanding that when you are calm, clear, and you exude this inner strength about you, this ability to keep things together, you tend to communicate in a way that cuts through the emotional noise. And it captivates the attention of those who really are looking for answers. And again, this can be in your business, this can be in social activities, this could be during an emergency. It also exists in your relationships. Women listen a lot more intently when she feels the presence of a man that speaks from grounded strength. And this is true. This has been proven over and over again. So this isn't just my opinion. This is a verifiable fact. When men are able to um, have that presence of confidence, composure, and discipline, there they are again. They tend to focus more on what the man is saying, what he needs, and how he's moving forward. She's going to be much more likely to want to move forward with him. There's no room for manipulation. There's no need for noise, and there's nothing that fear will actually contribute to the situation. So all they can really do is move, and movement is good. Movement's very good. So I think we've covered this one pretty well. What do you think, Jason?
Yeah, I think we got this one really, really good. I mean, this is such an important topic, communication, and I would encourage all of you to listen to this one again, to take away any key notes that you have, or that we've given, or any takeaways that you might want to get from it. I mean, it's worthwhile.
I thought I
And
listened. I thought I listened to this more, even though I was one of the ones giving the talk. So, even though I was one of the contributors, I want to listen to this again. Say, I really said that. Wow, I'm a smart guy.
yeah, and I've done that from time to time too. And so, yeah, we appreciate you guys being here today and being with us. And we just want to encourage each and every one of you that you're not alone on this journey. There's a reason why Jason and I are here putting these podcasts out. There's a reason why we are doing what we're doing with Lifting the Soul Ministries. So we just want to encourage you to like and subscribe to this channel on YouTube. We're also on Rumble and Spotify. We're on all the major social medias, and we're just going to keep growing from there. And we're bringing on guests from time to time, and we had a good run of guests, and we got more lined up, and we're going to continue this journey, speaking into your lives and encouraging you along the way.
Yeah, we
So
like three in a row. It was something massive. Where we just like guest after guest after guest.
yeah,
But to close everything out, what I really want to let you remind all you men out there that are listening to this, if you want to be heard, you can best be heard by being solid in the way that you are, knowing that your truth is enough. Yelling, threatening, withdrawing does not make you heard. It just being able to trust that what you believe, the convictions that you have, delivered calmly, is enough.
Well said, Jason. Well, thanks again, everybody. Until next time, much love.